The massive Zephyrian warship Eternal Order hung in space like a floating city. Its dark metal hull stretched for kilometers, covered in glowing blue symbols that showed the rank and status of every creature aboard. Commander Vextal stood on the bridge, his four eyes scanning the displays that showed an approaching vessel. "Unknown ship detected," announced his subordinate, third-rank Telmar. The younger Zephyrian kept his head bowed low, as was proper when speaking to a superior. "The vessel appears to be from a previously unknown species." Vextal's main eyes focused on the strange ship, while his smaller secondary eyes continued monitoring his crew. The alien vessel looked crude compared to Zephyrian technology. It was smaller, built from gray metal, and had no visible rank markings on its hull. How did these beings know who was in charge? "Send a standard greeting," Vextal ordered. "Request identification and hierarchical structure." The response came quickly. A face appeared on the main screen. Pale skin, strange hair covering the top of its head, and only two eyes. The creature wore a dark uniform with small metal shapes attached to the chest and shoulders. "This is Admiral Janet Chen of the United Earth Navy ship Diplomatic Unity," the being said. "We come in peace, seeking dialogue between our peoples." Vextal felt relief wash through his body. Finally, a species that understood proper order. The creature had identified itself with a rank first. "Admiral, this was how civilized beings should behave. I am Commander Vextal of the Zephyrian Empire," he replied, making sure to state his own rank clearly. "We welcome contact with your people. Your use of rank structure suggests you are a civilized species." Admiral Chen smiled, showing white teeth. "We would be honored to begin formal negotiations. I have my senior staff with me for preliminary discussions." "Excellent," Vextal said. "We shall meet on neutral ground. Prepare your delegation." 2 hours later, Vextal stood in the conference chamber of a small space station that served as neutral territory. His own delegation followed proper protocol. Second Commander Yex Knoll stood exactly 3 steps behind him, while third-rank Telmar remained 4 steps back. Each wore the correct robe showing their position in the hierarchy. The human delegation entered, and Vextal immediately began analyzing their structure. Admiral Chen led the group, wearing the most decorations on her uniform. Behind her came another human with slightly fewer markings. This one introduced himself as Commander Rodriguez. A third human followed with even fewer symbols, identifying herself as Lieutenant Park. Perfect. These humans clearly understood the proper order of things. "Welcome," Vextal said, gesturing with his primary arms while keeping his secondary arms folded in the position that showed respect between equals. "Your species shows wisdom in maintaining clear hierarchy." Admiral Chen nodded. "Order and structure are important to us. We believe in clear chains of command and proper respect for authority." The preliminary talks went smoothly. The humans explained their star systems, their government structure, their military organization. Everything made sense to Vextal. The humans had presidents and generals, admirals and commanders, just like any proper civilization. "Your federation sounds well organized," Second Commander Yex Knoll observed during a break in discussions. "Unlike the scatterfolk we encountered last year." Vextal shuddered at the memory. The scatterfolk had no ranks at all. Every individual seemed to make their own decisions without consulting anyone else. They had been impossible to negotiate with because no one could identify who was actually in charge. "The humans are much more sensible," he agreed. "Notice how their admiral makes all the important decisions and the others wait for her commands." This was exactly what Vextal observed during the sessions. When discussing trade agreements, Admiral Chen would consider the options and make pronouncements. Commander Rodriguez and Lieutenant Park would nod and take notes, but they never contradicted their superior or tried to make decisions above their station. During the third day of talks, the subject turned to technology exchange. The humans were particularly interested in Zephyrian medical advances, while the Zephyrians wanted to learn about human engineering techniques. "Our medical technology could benefit your people greatly," Vextal explained. "However, we must ensure proper protocols are followed. Only authorized medical ranks may access such information." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "We understand completely. In our system, medical decisions go through proper channels as well. We have strict hierarchies in our hospitals and research facilities." "As it should be," Vextal replied with satisfaction. "Chaos in medical matters leads to disaster." The humans agreed to a formal treaty signing ceremony. Both species would exchange cultural liaisons and begin limited technology sharing. Everything proceeded exactly as Zephyrian protocols demanded. On the final day of preliminary negotiations, Admiral Chen made a request that pleased Vextal greatly. "Commander, we would like to invite a Zephyrian delegation to visit Earth," she said. "You could observe our society firsthand and see how we maintain order among our population." "An excellent proposal," Vextal replied. "We accept. When shall this visit occur?" "We have a medical conference beginning next month," Commander Rodriguez interjected, then immediately looked to Admiral Chen for approval to continue speaking. Admiral Chen nodded permission. "Yes, it would be an ideal time to show you our medical hierarchy in action. Some of our finest doctors and researchers will be presenting their work." Vextal was impressed by the careful way the commander had sought permission before expanding on his superior's words. These humans truly understood proper behavior. "We look forward to observing your medical ranks in their natural environment," Vextal said. "It will help us understand your species better." As the human delegation prepared to depart, Vextal felt confident about the future relationship between their species. Unlike so many other races they had encountered, the humans seemed to share Zephyrian values about order, hierarchy, and proper authority. "Sir," third-rank Telmar approached carefully after the humans had left, "do you believe these humans will prove reliable allies?" "Indeed," Vextal replied. "They understand that civilization requires structure. Their military ranks are clearly defined. Their leaders make decisions while subordinates follow orders, and they respect proper protocol in all things." He looked out at the human ship as it departed. The diplomatic unity moved in formation with 2 escort vessels, maintaining perfect spacing and coordination. Everything about the humans suggested a people who valued order above chaos. "Prepare a report for High Command," Vextal ordered. "Recommend full diplomatic relations with the Human Federation. They are a species we can work with." Second Commander Yexnol bowed properly. "It shall be done, Commander. Shall I emphasize their military structure in the report?" "Yes, make sure High Command understands that these humans follow proper hierarchical protocols. Unlike the individualistic species we have encountered before, the humans can be counted on to honor agreements because their leaders actually control their subordinates." As Vextal returned to his ship, he felt satisfied with the successful first contact. The humans had proven themselves to be a civilized species that understood the importance of rank, order, and proper authority. Their upcoming visit to Earth would surely confirm everything he had observed about their well-structured society. He had no idea that his understanding of human nature was about to be completely shattered. 3 weeks later, Commander Vextal found himself aboard a human transport ship traveling to Earth. The vessel was clean and orderly, with human crew members moving efficiently through their duties. Everything continued to confirm his positive impression of human civilization. "Commander," his aide third-rank Telmar approached with proper deference, "we are receiving urgent communications from the outer colonies." Vextal reviewed the incoming messages on his personal display. His satisfaction quickly turned to concern, then alarm. Reports were flooding in from multiple star systems. Both human and Zephyrian colonies were experiencing outbreaks of an unknown plague. "How severe are these outbreaks?" he asked. "Initial reports suggest high mortality rates," Telmar replied, keeping his voice low. "The disease appears to affect both our species, though with different symptoms. Within hours, the situation became critical. The human transport ship received new orders and changed course toward the nearest affected system." Vextal watched with approval as the human crew followed their orders without question, maintaining proper discipline even in crisis. Admiral Chen contacted him directly from Earth. "Commander, we need to establish a joint medical response immediately. This plague could devastate both our peoples if we don't act quickly." "Agreed," Vextal replied. "Who will lead the medical hierarchy for this operation?" "We're assembling our best people now," Admiral Chen said. "I'll defer to our medical experts on treatment protocols." The phrase puzzled Vextal slightly. Why would an admiral defer to anyone? But he assumed she meant she would consult with her medical officers while maintaining overall command. When they arrived at Kepler Station, the situation was worse than reported. The station's medical facilities were overwhelmed with patients from both species. Zephyrian doctors worked frantically alongside human medical personnel, but they struggled to understand how the disease affected each species differently. Vex Tal was reviewing casualty reports when he noticed something strange happening in the human delegation. Admiral Chen was speaking with a small group of humans, but instead of giving orders, she seemed to be asking questions. "I need a full briefing on the medical situation," Chen said to a woman who wore no rank insignia at all. The woman nodded calmly. "Admiral, I'll need access to all patient data from both species. We also need to establish quarantine protocols immediately and redirect medical supplies from the Titan research facility." Vextal waited for Admiral Chen to approve or modify these requests. Instead, the Admiral simply said, "Understood, Doctor." "What do you need from me, Doctor?" Vextal studied the woman more carefully. She was average height for a human, with graying hair and simple clothing, no military uniform, no rank markings, no visible symbols of authority. Yet Admiral Chen was treating her as if she outranked everyone present. "I'll need you to authorize the requisition of medical supplies from all nearby facilities," the woman continued. "We're also going to need to commandeer 3 research ships for mobile treatment centers." "Done," Admiral Chen replied without hesitation. Vextal was confused. How could someone with no apparent rank give orders to an admiral? He approached Second Commander Yexnol, who had been observing the humans with equal bewilderment. "Do you understand their hierarchy?" Vextal asked quietly. "No, sir," Yexnol replied. "The female with no rank markings appears to be directing the admiral's actions. Perhaps she holds a position above admiral that we don't recognize." Before Vextal could investigate further, the mysterious woman approached him directly. "Commander Vextal, I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez," she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I understand your people have been affected by this outbreak as well." "Yes," Vextal replied cautiously. "I am the senior Zephyrian representative here." "Who exactly are you in your hierarchy?" Dr. Martinez seemed amused by the question. "I'm a doctor. Specifically, I specialize in xenobiology and infectious diseases. Right now, that makes me the person most qualified to coordinate our response to this crisis." "But what is your rank?" Vextal pressed. "Who is your commanding officer?" "I don't have a military rank," Dr. Martinez explained. "I'm a civilian medical professional. But in a medical emergency like this, military personnel defer to medical expertise." This made no sense to Vextal. In Zephyrian society, medical personnel served under the military hierarchy like everyone else. Doctors were ranked as medical thirds, medical seconds, or at the highest level, medical firsts. They never outranked actual military commanders. "So Admiral Chen reports to you?" he asked. "Not exactly," Dr. Martinez said, already turning her attention to a datapad full of patient information. "She has authority over military matters, but medical decisions are my responsibility." We worked together. Over the following hours, Vextal watched in growing confusion as the human hierarchy seemed to dissolve completely. Dr. Martinez began issuing orders to everyone, not just medical staff, but military officers, engineers, and civilian administrators. Even more surprisingly, they all obeyed without question. When she told Commander Rodriguez to redirect 2 warships to serve as medical transports, he immediately contacted the fleet to arrange it. When she instructed Lieutenant Park to coordinate with civilian shipping companies for medical supply runs, Park began making calls without seeking approval from anyone else. "This is chaos," third-rank Telmar whispered to Vextal. "How can their society function when anyone can give orders to anyone else?" But it wasn't chaos. Despite the apparent breakdown of normal hierarchy, the human response was becoming incredibly efficient. Medical supplies flowed in from dozens of sources. Temporary hospitals were established in record time. Research data was shared instantly between facilities across multiple star systems. Dr. Martinez seemed to be at the center of it all, but she wasn't commanding through authority. She was coordinating through expertise. When a Zephyrian medical officer questioned one of her treatment protocols, she didn't assert rank. Instead, she explained the scientific reasoning behind her decision and provided supporting data. "Commander," Admiral Chen approached Vextal during a brief lull in the activity. "Dr. Martinez wants to establish a joint research team with your medical staff. She believes combining our knowledge might lead to a breakthrough." "Who authorized her to make this request?" Vextal asked. Admiral Chen looked puzzled. "She's our senior medical officer for this crisis. She doesn't need authorization to coordinate medical research." "But she has no rank," Vextal protested. "How can she have authority over ranked officers?" "Commander," Admiral Chen said gently, In human society, authority comes from different sources depending on the situation. Dr. Martinez has spent 30 years studying alien diseases. Right now, her knowledge makes her the most qualified person to lead our response. We trust her judgment because she's earned that trust through competence. Vextal felt his understanding of human society beginning to crumble. Everything they had observed during the negotiations suggested humans followed proper hierarchical order. Yet when faced with a real crisis, they seemed to abandon their command structure entirely. As night fell on the station, Vextal found Dr. Martinez in the main medical bay, working alongside Zephyrian doctors to analyze blood samples from infected patients. She was asking them questions, listening to their theories, incorporating their suggestions into her research. "Doctor," he said, still struggling with how to address someone who held no formal rank. "How does your species maintain order if anyone can assume command during a crisis?" Dr. Martinez looked up from her microscope. "We don't abandon order, Commander. We adapt our leadership to match the situation. In battle, we follow military commanders because they have military expertise. In medical emergencies, we follow medical experts because they have medical expertise. The goal isn't to maintain rigid hierarchy. It's to put the most qualified person in charge of each decision." "But how do you determine who is qualified?" Vextal asked. "Without formal ranks, how do you know who to trust?" "The same way your people do, I imagine," Dr. Martinez replied. "Through education, experience, and results. The difference is that we're willing to let expertise override formal authority when the situation demands it." She returned to her work, leaving Vextal to contemplate this disturbing revelation. The humans he had thought were so similar to his own people were actually operating under completely different principles. Their apparent respect for hierarchy during negotiations had been misleading. They could maintain formal structure when it was appropriate, but they could also abandon it entirely when circumstances required a different approach. As reports continued flowing in from the expanding crisis, Vextal realized that everything he thought he understood about human society was wrong. And he was about to discover just how wrong he had been. By the third day of the crisis, Vextal's entire understanding of human civilization had shattered completely. What he witnessed defied every principle of proper social order that the Zephyrian Empire held sacred. The breaking point came during the morning briefing. Dr. Martinez stood before a mixed group of humans and Zephyrians, delivering updates on the plague's progress. Vextal expected Admiral Chen to lead the meeting, but instead she sat quietly while the unranked doctor took charge. "We've identified the pathogen's transmission method," Dr. Martinez announced. "It spreads through atmospheric particles, which means our current isolation protocols are insufficient." A Zephyrian medical second, named Kexvril, raised one of his 4 hands. "Dr. Martinez, our analysis suggests the disease may be artificially created. The genetic markers are too precise for natural evolution." Vextal tensed. A medical second was questioning the conclusions of someone who held no rank at all. In Zephyrian society, such insubordination would result in immediate disciplinary action. But Dr. Martinez simply nodded thoughtfully. "Show me your data." For the next hour, she worked with Kexvril to examine the evidence. They debated theories, shared research, and ultimately reached a conclusion together. Not once did Dr. Martinez assert authority or dismiss the Zephyrians' input because of rank differences. "If this is a bioweapon," Dr. Martinez said finally, "we need to change our entire approach. I'm recommending we evacuate all non-essential personnel from affected systems." Admiral Chen spoke up. "Doctor, that would require moving millions of people. I'll need to coordinate with the entire fleet." "Do it," Dr. Martinez replied simply. And Admiral Chen began making calls to arrange the massive evacuation, as if receiving orders from a civilian doctor was perfectly normal. Vextal watched in horror as the human command structure continued to collapse around him. Within hours, the evacuation order had spread across human space. Ship captains were abandoning their regular duties to ferry refugees. Research scientists were commandeering military vessels for mobile laboratories. Civilian administrators were redirecting government resources without consulting their superiors. "Sir," third-rank Telmar approached Vextal with obvious distress. "I've been monitoring human communications. Their entire chain of command appears to have dissolved." "Explain," Vextal demanded, though he feared he already understood. "A civilian engineer has taken control of 3 military shipyards to mass-produce medical equipment. A university professor is directing the deployment of an entire battle fleet. A hospital administrator is issuing orders to planetary governors. Telmar's voice became increasingly strained as he continued. Most disturbing of all, sir. Everyone is obeying these orders without question. Military officers are following commands from civilians. High-ranking officials are deferring to low-level specialists. It's complete chaos, but it wasn't chaos. That was what troubled Vextal most. Despite the apparent breakdown of all proper authority, the human response was becoming more efficient by the hour. Resources flowed to where they were needed most. Expertise was deployed wherever it could do the most good. Decisions were made quickly and implemented immediately. Dr. Martinez had become the unofficial coordinator of the entire crisis response, but she didn't rule through commands. Instead, she made suggestions that people chose to follow because they trusted her judgment. When she recommended establishing quarantine zones, planetary governors implemented them. When she suggested redirecting medical supplies, shipping companies complied voluntarily. Vextal decided he needed to understand this madness. He found Dr. Martinez in the station's communication center, coordinating with teams across a dozen star systems simultaneously. "Doctor," he interrupted carefully, "I must ask, who gave you authority over this entire operation?" Dr. Martinez looked up from her displays, seeming genuinely puzzled by the question. "No one gave me authority, Commander. People are asking for my recommendations because this is my area of expertise. But how can you coordinate military vessels and government resources without proper authorization?" "I'm not commanding anyone," she explained patiently. "I'm providing medical guidance and people are choosing to follow it because the alternative is watching millions die." A new communication came in, and Vextal watched the exchange with growing bewilderment. A human ship captain was reporting that his vessel had broken off from a trade mission to deliver medical supplies to an affected colony. "Captain Torres, did Admiral Chen order you to abandon your original mission?" Dr. Martinez asked. "No, Doctor," the captain replied, "but my ship was the closest one with the right cargo capacity. I figured saving lives was more important than delivering luxury goods." "Good thinking. Can you also pick up a research team from the Proxima station? They have data we need." "Already on my way there, Doctor." The communication ended and Dr. Martinez turned back to Vextal. "You see? Captain Torres made his own decision based on the situation. I didn't order him to do anything. But he called you Doctor with the same respect he would show to an admiral." Vextal protested. "How do you explain that?" "In this context, medical expertise outranks military authority," Dr. Martinez said simply. "Captain Torres understands that I know more about fighting this plague than any military officer, so he respects my professional judgment." Over the following days, Vextal documented example after example of humans abandoning their formal hierarchy in favor of what they called situational leadership. An elderly maintenance worker named Johnson had taken charge of retrofitting ships for medical use, and even senior engineers were following his instructions because he had 40 years of experience with life support systems. A young communications officer named Williams was coordinating information flow between research facilities because she happened to have developed new protocols for handling massive data streams. Officers decades older than her were implementing her suggestions without question. Most shocking of all, Dr. Martinez herself began deferring to other specialists when they knew more about specific aspects of the crisis. When a Zephyrian biochemist proposed a new treatment approach, she immediately authorized clinical trials. When a human logistics expert suggested a better way to distribute medicines, she adopted his plan completely. "This is impossible," Second Commander Yexnull said during a private meeting with Vextal. "How can a society function when leadership changes constantly based on circumstances?" "I don't understand it either," Vextal admitted, "but I cannot deny the results. Their response has been more effective than anything we could have organized using proper hierarchical methods." The truth was becoming undeniable. The humans' apparent chaos was actually a sophisticated form of organization that the Zephyrians had never encountered. Instead of rigid ranks that determined who could make decisions, humans seemed to have a fluid system that automatically elevated the most qualified person for each specific situation. When the plague reached Zephyrian space, Vextal faced a choice. He could insist on maintaining proper hierarchical protocols while his people suffered, Or he could adopt the human approach and let expertise guide decisions regardless of rank. He thought about medical second Kexvril, whose insights had proven crucial to understanding the disease. Under Zephyrian protocol, Kexvril should report to medical first Dexlon, who should report to Commander Medical Jex Ral, who should report to Vextal himself. But what if Kexvril was actually the most qualified person to coordinate the medical response? The question challenged everything Vextal had been taught about proper society. But as he watched Dr. Martinez save lives by putting knowledge above rank, he began to wonder if the Zephyrians had been wrong about the nature of true authority. The humans had shown him that hierarchy could be a tool rather than a master. They could maintain formal structure when it served their purposes, but they could also abandon it entirely when circumstances demanded flexibility. As the crisis deepened, Vextal realized he was about to face the most difficult decision of his career, whether to trust human methods or cling to Zephyrian traditions while his people died. The breakthrough came on the 7th day of the crisis, and it happened because Vextal made a decision that violated every principle of Zephyrian military protocol. He was in the medical bay watching Dr. Martinez work with a team of researchers from both species. The plague had mutated again, making their previous treatments less effective. Time was running out for thousands of patients across multiple star systems. Medical Second Kexvril approached with urgent data. Dr. Martinez, I believe I've found a pattern in the mutation sequences. If I'm correct, we might be able to predict the next evolutionary step. Dr. Martinez immediately abandoned her current work to examine Kexvril's findings. This is brilliant, she said after studying the data. You're seeing connections that our computer models missed completely. However, Kexvril continued hesitantly, implementing my suggested treatment would require overriding the medical protocols that Medical First Dexlon established for Zephyrian patients. Vextal felt the familiar weight of proper procedure. Medical First Dexlon was the highest-ranking Zephyrian medical officer present. Protocol demanded that all medical decisions go through him first. Where is Medical First Dexlon? Dr. Martinez asked. Attending a planning meeting with the senior command staff, Kexvril replied. He should return in approximately 2 hours. Dr. Martinez frowned. We don't have 2 hours. The mutation rate is accelerating. If we wait, we'll lose our window to stop this new variant. She turned to Vextal. Commander, I need your medical second to begin implementing this treatment immediately. Will you authorize it? Vextal stared at her in shock. She was asking him to let a medical second override a medical first's protocols. In Zephyrian society, such an action could result in court-martial for everyone involved. But then he looked at the patients lying in the medical bay. Zephyrians and humans alike all dying from a disease that Kexvril might be able to stop. Protocol demanded he wait for proper authorization. Reality demanded he act immediately. Kexvril, Vextal said slowly, proceed with your treatment plan. The young medical second's eyes widened in surprise, but he immediately began preparing the new therapy. Dr. Martinez smiled approvingly and began adapting the treatment for human patients. Commander, she said while working, you just made the right choice. Sometimes leadership means knowing when to break the rules. Over the next few hours, Vextal watched as Kexvril's treatment proved successful. The new variant of the plague was stopped before it could spread further. Lives were saved because expertise had been allowed to override rank. When Medical First Dexlon returned and learned what had happened, he was furious. Commander Vextal, you have violated direct medical protocols. Medical Second Kexvril acted above his authority. Medical First, Vextal replied carefully. The treatment was successful. The new variant has been contained. That is irrelevant, Dexlon snapped. Proper procedures must be followed regardless of outcome. I demand that Medical Second Kexvril be disciplined for insubordination. Dr. Martinez, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward. Medical First Dexlon, may I ask you a question? You may, Dexlon replied stiffly. What is the primary purpose of medical hierarchy in your society? To ensure proper order and prevent chaos in medical decision-making, Dexlon answered immediately. And what happens when following that hierarchy results in preventable deaths? Dexlon paused, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Proper procedure must be maintained. Individual decisions cannot be allowed to override established authority, even when those individual decisions save lives that following procedure would have cost. The greater good requires maintaining proper order, Dexlon insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. I understand your perspective, but in human society we believe that hierarchy should serve the mission, not the other way around. When rigid structure prevents us from achieving our goals, we adapt the structure. She gestured toward the recovering patients. Your medical second saved lives today because he was allowed to use his expertise when it was needed most. In our system, that makes him a hero, not an insubordinate. Vextal found himself studying both officers. Dexlon represented traditional Zephyrian values: order, hierarchy, predictable authority. But Kexfril represented something new: expertise applied directly where it was needed, regardless of formal rank. Medical first, Vextal said finally. I want you to work directly with Dr. Martinez for the remainder of this crisis. Observe her methods. Learn how humans coordinate medical responses. Sir, I must protest. That is an order, Vextal said firmly. And Medical Second Kexfril will continue working with the Joint Research Team. His insights have proven too valuable to waste on disciplinary procedures. Over the following days, Vextal watched as Dexlon gradually adapted to working alongside Dr. Martinez. The human doctor treated the Zephyrian medical first with respect, but she also ignored his rank when making critical decisions. She listened to his expertise and incorporated his knowledge, but she never deferred to his authority simply because of his position. At first, Dexlon was frustrated by this approach. But as he observed the results, faster decision-making, better coordination, more effective treatments, he began to understand the human perspective. Dr. Martinez, Dexlon said during one late-night research session, how does your society prevent chaos when anyone can challenge authority? We don't eliminate authority, Dr. Martinez explained. We base it on competence rather than position. A ship's captain has authority over navigation because they know how to fly the ship. A doctor has authority over medical decisions because they understand medicine. An engineer has authority over technical problems because they know how systems work. But what happens when authorities conflict? Dexlon asked. If the captain and the doctor disagree about evacuating sick patients, who decides? Whoever has the most relevant expertise for the specific situation, Dr. Martinez replied. If it's a question of whether the ship can safely make the journey, we listen to the captain. If it's a question of whether the patients can survive the trip, we listen to the doctor. And if they disagree about both aspects, then they work together to find a solution that addresses both concerns. The goal isn't to determine who's in charge, it's to make the best possible decision. Vextal, who had been listening to this conversation, felt something fundamental shift in his understanding. The humans didn't abandon hierarchy, they made it dynamic. Authority flowed to whoever was most qualified to handle each specific challenge. This explained why Dr. Martinez could command respect from Admiral Chen. In a medical crisis, her expertise made her the logical leader. It explained why Captain Torres had voluntarily changed his mission. He recognized that the situation called for medical transport rather than trade delivery. Most importantly, it explained why the human response had been so effective. Instead of forcing every decision through a rigid chain of command, they had created a flexible system that could adapt to any situation. Dr. Martinez, Vextal said, I believe I'm beginning to understand your species. You don't follow ranks, you follow competence, she smiled. Now you're getting it, Commander. We maintain formal structures when they're useful, but we're always willing to set them aside when circumstances require a different approach. As the plague continued to recede under their joint efforts, Vextal realized that everything he thought he knew about leadership and society had been fundamentally changed. The humans had shown him that true strength came not from rigid hierarchy, but from the wisdom to adapt leadership to circumstances. The question now was whether the Zephyrian Empire would be willing to learn the same lesson. 3 months after the plague crisis ended, Vextal stood once again on the bridge of the Eternal Order. But everything had changed, not just his ship, not just his crew, but his entire understanding of what it meant to lead. The formal ceremony was about to begin. High Command had summoned him to receive commendation for his role in ending the plague crisis. Representatives from across the Zephyrian Empire had gathered to hear his report on human society and to decide the future of diplomatic relations. Commander, Third-rank Telmar approached with his usual respectful posture. High Command is ready for your presentation. But Vextal noticed something different about his aide. Telmar's posture was still properly respectful, but there was a new confidence in his bearing. During the crisis, the young officer had shown remarkable skill at coordinating communications between different species and departments. Vextal had learned to rely on his expertise rather than simply giving him orders. Are you prepared to present your analysis of human communication protocols? Vextal asked. Yes, sir, Telmar replied. I believe High Command will find the data very interesting. The presentation hall was filled with the highest-ranking officers in the Zephyrian Empire. Supreme Commander Zexcool presided from the central dais, flanked by the Grand Admirals and senior advisors. Their formal robes displayed every rank and honor they had earned through decades of proper service. Vextal began his report with traditional protocol, summarizing the military aspects of the crisis and the successful cooperation between human and Zephyrian forces. But then came the moment he had been dreading. High Command, he said carefully, my observations of human society have led me to conclusions that may challenge our traditional understanding of proper governance. Supreme Commander Zexcool leaned forward. Explain. Vextal activated the holographic displays that showed the organizational charts he had created during the crisis. Initially, we believed humans followed hierarchical structures similar to our own. Their military ranks suggested a well-ordered society that respected proper authority. Murmurs of approval came from the assembled officers. However, Vextal continued, when faced with the medical emergency, human organizational structure proved to be far more complex than we understood. He showed recordings of Dr. Martinez coordinating the crisis response. This individual holds no military rank, yet she effectively commanded resources across multiple star systems. Admiral Chen, a high-ranking military officer, deferred to her judgment on all medical matters. The murmurs changed to concerned whispers. Furthermore, Vextal said, knowing he was approaching dangerous territory, humans routinely allowed expertise to override rank when circumstances demanded it. Military officers followed orders from civilian specialists. High-ranking officials implemented suggestions from low-level technicians. Authority flowed to whoever was most qualified for each specific situation. Grand Admiral Kexzan stood abruptly. Commander Vextal, are you suggesting that humans have no respect for proper hierarchy? No, sir, Vextal replied. I'm suggesting they have a different understanding of what hierarchy should accomplish. He activated another display, showing the results of the joint medical effort. Under traditional Zephyrian protocols, coordinating a response across multiple species and star systems would have required months of negotiations through proper channels. The humans accomplished the same coordination in hours by temporarily setting aside formal structure in favor of direct expert-to-expert communication. Supreme Commander Zexcool studied the data carefully. The results were undeniably effective. But at what cost to social order? This was the question Vextal had been preparing for. High Command, I request permission to present testimony from Medical First Dex Lon, who worked directly with human medical personnel throughout the crisis. Permission was granted and Dexlon stepped forward. His account of working with Dr. Martinez painted a picture that clearly troubled the assembled leadership. She treated my rank with respect, Dexlon reported, but she did not defer to it when medical expertise was required. Initially, this seemed like insubordination. However, I observed that she applied the same principle to human personnel. When a junior technician had better knowledge of equipment operation, she listened to him rather than his superior officers. And what was your assessment of this approach? Supreme Commander Zexcool asked. Dexlon hesitated, clearly struggling with his answer. Sir, it was more effective than our traditional methods. Decisions were made faster, expertise was utilized more efficiently, and the overall coordination was superior to anything I had previously observed. The hall fell silent. A medical first had just stated that human methods were superior to Zephyrian protocols. Vextal seized the moment. High Command, I believe we have misunderstood the nature of effective leadership. We have assumed that authority must flow from position, but humans have shown us that it can also flow from competence. Grand Admiral Kexzan was clearly disturbed. Commander, you seem to be suggesting that our entire social structure is inferior to human chaos. Not inferior, sir. but perhaps an incomplete. Vextal activated his final display. I propose that we maintain our traditional hierarchy for normal operations, but develop the flexibility to adapt our structure when circumstances require specialized expertise. We could create protocols that allow temporary authority transfer to qualified specialists during crisis situations. The debate that followed was intense. Conservative officers argued that any deviation from established hierarchy would lead to chaos and the collapse of Zephyrian civilization. Progressive voices suggested that adaptation was necessary for the Empire to remain competitive with more flexible species like the humans. Supreme Commander Zex Cool listened to all arguments before speaking. Commander Vextal, you are proposing a fundamental change to our society. Such changes cannot be made lightly. I understand, sir, but I believe the alternative is stagnation. The humans have shown us that rigid adherence to hierarchy can actually weaken our ability to respond to new challenges. And you believe we can adopt their methods without losing our essential character? Vextal thought about his experiences with Dr. Martinez, about watching Kexvril save lives by applying his expertise when it was needed most, about learning that authority could be based on knowledge rather than just position. Sir, I believe we can become stronger by learning to value competence alongside rank. We don't need to abandon our traditions, but we can expand them to include new forms of leadership. After hours of discussion, Supreme Commander Zex Cool announced the decision. The Empire will establish an experimental program. Selected units will be trained in flexible command protocols based on the human model. We will evaluate the results over the next year. As the ceremony concluded, Vextal felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The Zephyrian Empire was beginning a journey that would challenge centuries of tradition, but it might also make them stronger and more adaptable. Medical First Dexlon approached him after the formal proceedings ended. Commander, I want to thank you for allowing me to work with Dr. Martinez. It was educational. How so? I learned that respecting expertise doesn't diminish authority, it enhances it. When I stopped worrying about maintaining my position and started focusing on achieving the best medical outcomes, I actually became more effective as a leader. Third-rank Telmar joined them, carrying a communication device. Commander, we're receiving a message from Dr. Martinez on Earth. She's asking if we would be interested in participating in a joint research project on adaptive organizational structures. Vextal smiled, an expression that had become more common since his time with the humans. Tell her we would be honored to continue learning from each other. As the Eternal Order prepared to depart for the experimental training program, Vextal reflected on how much had changed. The humans had taught him that true strength didn't come from rigid hierarchy, but from the wisdom to adapt leadership to circumstances. They had shown him that authority based on competence could coexist with respect for tradition. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that different species could learn from each other without losing their essential character. The Zephyrian Empire would remain Zephyrian, but it would also become more flexible, more adaptive, and ultimately more capable of meeting whatever challenges the galaxy might present. Dr. Martinez had been right about putting the most qualified person in charge of each decision. But she had also been right about something else, that different species could work together by respecting each other's strengths rather than insisting on their own methods. As the stars shifted around them, Vextal knew that both the Zephyrian Empire and human civilization would be stronger for having learned from each other. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but perhaps those challenges would be easier to meet when species could combine rigid structure with flexible adaptation, traditional authority with merit-based leadership. The humans had believed in following expertise rather than just rank. Now the Zephyrians were learning to believe in it too.